There she is.
Hey, Dolly.
Hey.
I said if Dolly's late, it's because she's having technical difficulties because Dolly's not late.
I had to download Zoom again.
What?
I'm like, I thought it was on here, but I haven't used it since COVID.
Yeah.
Oh. I thought you were just using the same tablet that Ross had used when I helped set it up when I was out there.
Yeah, that's what I'm using, but it had me download it again.
Weird.
I'm not great at the...
You probably have 2 Zooms on your computer.
I probably bought something. I'm sure I've just bought, knowing me, it's the most expensive one you can get.
I'm Stacey.
And I'm Lois.
And this is Whose Girl Are You? Today we have my friend Dolly with us. We're going to talk to her about a variety of things, whatever comes up. It's always just a wild card with this one. But I think we'll talk about hospitality some, yeah?
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. But we don't really know each other, so my first question for you is going to be, whose girl are you?
So you probably wouldn't know my parents because they're not from the apostolic background. Okay. So my parents are Lane and Donna. I'm from a family of 13 kids.
Nice.
From Minnesota. But it's funny when I think about that, I think you guys are like, we're asked that a lot growing up. For me, because I was from a small town, everybody knew whose girl I was. Nobody had to ask. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't till marrying my husband that I got asked that a lot then because they didn't know who my parents. They're like, who are you?
Right.
And now I live in Texas and I'm really, I guess I'm Ross's girl now. And so we're married, 5 kids and 1 grandbaby on the way.
Nice.
Where do you fall in that family of 11?
So I'm
11?
13. Of 13. I'm 8 of 13.
8 of 13. You're kind of like the middle child. That explains so much.
I'm definitely a middle. We were just talking about it, how bigger families, my niece was visiting and I was telling her how our generations overlapped, where my youngest brother is younger than my oldest nephew. And so then it turns into like for those younger kids who never lived in the house with the oldest kids, they kind of view them more as aunts and uncles than like siblings, But I was definitely where I remember all the siblings, I've lived with all of them.
Right. Being in the middle, you had the olders and the youngers.
Right.
Yeah.
So we call them like the second generation, like the younger ones.
Yeah. Lots of families, they say little.
Now that like everybody's older and adult, it's a lot more like everybody's found their own little pods and it's not necessarily based on your, birth order and stuff.
Yeah. Those large families are so interesting how there ends up being these ones are really good friends and talk a lot, but these other ones don't, and those ones might, and you just don't.
For sure. Yeah. That's how ours is. And I'm like, so for some people that's weird. They're like, oh, you don't talk to all of your siblings all the time. And I was like, no, but I talk to plenty. I feel completely fulfilled in that area still. So more than most still would have for siblings and stuff. So
yeah.
That's awesome.
So, when I was at your house, I flew out to Texas, May? It was the beginning of May in the year before I had done the same thing. And when I got out of the car, I said, oh, by the way, did you know that this is my annual trip to Texas? I'll be back next May as well. So plan accordingly. And she laughed, but it's always such a good time just hanging out and talking. So that's why I wanted to have you on today. And when I was there, I don't know if you remember me asking you, but I said, hey, would you be on my podcast? You pretty much were like, I don't know. You weren't very committal, but I said, well, because you said, what would I talk about? Which was super laughable for anyone that knows Dolly, because I don't think finding something to talk about has ever really been an issue for you. But
staying on topic might be.
Yeah, and I say that in the most loving manner, right? I'm not trying to say anything negative here. But I did happen to ask, because you said, what would I talk about? And I kind of said, what would you like to talk about? And you said hospitality. And I'm not sure if it was a joke because at that moment you were housing me.
It probably was a little bit. Usually when you come, you're like, what are you up to? And I was like, well, I got you from this date to this date. And then I got this person coming or whatever.
Yeah.
So do you host in your home a lot? Is that what you meant by hospitality was like?
I think so.
Yeah.
more than most, I would say, just because, for one, as far as out of town, when you live in like a sunnier climate, you're going to get the visitors more than like, we were back in Minnesota for 2 years, not as much company of people coming through.
Surprise.
Right. And
I still came.
Down here, Stacey came, her mom did come. I did have some company. But it's different when people are like, oh, spring break, we want to go south.
Right. Yeah. Where it's warm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so I think that that's part of it. And then usually I would say we for sure have like company, like people over a few times a week. So that's probably considered a lot.
Right.
Our kids are just kind of used to it.
Yeah.
That it's not always going to be just us. We definitely have dinner. I cook. I'm pretty scheduled. And so I try and cook like Monday through Thursday. Ross and I go out on Friday, and then he's in charge Saturday, and then we go out the family on Sunday. So there's 5 days a week that there's definitely option. Mm-hmm. And it's not like we're so rigid. I mean, like tonight we're having people over for dinner, and we'll grab a date night another time. But so yeah, we do seem to be kind of the hub.
Yeah.
And our kids are getting to that age where, their friends are, I've got a few out of the house, but still their friends come anyways.
Yes.
And so
how do you navigate that? Do you provide, or do you, provide is a bad word, because I provide for my kids' friends, but I don't I don't wait on them.
Yeah, we don't. They'll text like, hey, Miss Dolly, how's it? Cause we're in the South. It's Miss Dolly. And so then they're like, how's it going? And so I'm like, pretty good. That usually means they want to stop by. And so I'm like, oh, I'm making French dips. And then they're like, they know like dinner's usually about 6:00. Yeah. If they want to come for dinner, don't come at 7. It's already put away. You got to pull it out yourself. Yeah.
That's so funny, because I think every family and every home kind of does that their own way.
For sure. Like I was raised, we served my dad.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like my mom made sure he was served first, and
same thing happened in my house.
Yeah. I think it was part of that. And I would say like, we would be like considered old school, just that we do try and like, dinner's at a certain time. And if you're home, you're sitting down for dinner with us. Mm-hmm. But I do think hospitality is kind of like, as far as the entertaining side of it has really kind of gone away, and even hosting people, which is a different thing to be like out of town, or, there's probably a lot of reasons for it having kind of diminished, and maybe it'll make a comeback.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's diminished?
I think I would say inside and outside the church would be just out of, you have dual income. The wives are busy too. It's a lot to be like, hey, we're having so-and-so over for dinner, and you got to like get the house ready. You got to get, what are you making? Are you going to do dessert? And I have changed a lot in that, where it used to be like everything from scratch. A couple weeks ago, my dog died and I was still having somebody over that night. And I was like, we're just going to do pizza because Ross is burying the dog.
Right.
And so we just did pizza, and I had made a cake.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem like saying I'm going to order out.
Yeah. Change the plan.
Or I'm going to grab a rotisserie chicken and do salad or whatever. It can be as easy or as hard as my day requires it to be.
All right. I got to go back to something here though. Like rewind a second here. So your dog died.
You knew it was coming, Stace.
I know. I've just got to go back and tell this short little story. So I fly into Austin, and on the way home, we stop and meet up with one of my friends that lives out there as well. So Dolly and this other friend and I are having lunch, and this friend of ours is saying, oh yeah, they finally found some land, and they bought 20 acres. They're getting ready to start building. And Dolly just pipes up out of the blue and looks at me and says, that's where we can bury her. And I thought to myself, if anyone in the surrounding tables is listening right now, they were like,
so scary. Yeah.
All the cops. And even the friend was like, bury who?
Yeah.
And she's like, my dog.
Because, just so you know, when you come visit, guess where she's buried?
At my friend's house.
Yep. Yes. we live in a subdivision. I was like, I can't do it. And I had a friend who's lived here in San Antonio all her life. And she's like, we always buried our dogs in the backyard, of like town. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm too scared to do that. I need property for that.
Right.
And so, it was really nice of her.
Okay, I know it's off topic, but you just skimmed right over that, and honestly, like, I didn't know that lady had died. So I knew that she was dying. It was obvious when I was out there that she definitely was seeing her last days.
Yeah, but it was sad, but it's still...
At least she didn't say, that's where we can bury that lady.
I know. I probably was like, lady. But yeah. So even in that, it's just still, she passed away and I was like, do we still have this family over? And I'm like, right. Yeah, because they're really like, I wouldn't always do that
right.
on the day that the dog dies. But it was definitely a family that was much more compassionate to my kids than me, even because they love dogs and they have 5 and they've been through it and you know what I mean? So I would be a little bit more sensitive usually to them if it was an unknown family. This is people we were pretty close to. So I felt good about that. And we always are, I would say with having people over, we're careful because we go to church. And so a lot of life is based around that. And so then when our kids were little even, we didn't want them to assume everybody coming in the door is a saint, is a follower. And so we always try to make sure because it's 2 different people that you're entertaining types. And so we would make sure that they knew we're like, hey, this is somebody that doesn't know the Lord. Like, what is that going to look like? Mm-hmm. You're going to hear different lifestyles, probably bad language, different belief system. I always felt like it was important for my kids to be exposed to that too. And that you love them like where they're at, and you still serve everybody. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought it was important to do that. But this was a family my kids were comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. So your life does revolve so much around church and church activities. Where are you meeting these other people that aren't followers?
So I'll meet them through my kids' sports. I'll meet them at, a couple years ago, I had a friend who moved to Austin. She and her husband were like a half an hour from here at a dude ranch for a weekend getaway. They met this lady and her son who were like traveling the country, and she was homeschooling and she was a teacher, had pulled him out of school and was just showing him the country. It was right over Thanksgiving. So she was going to be in San Antonio. So she texted me and was like, hey, I met this lady. Would you invite her to your Thanksgiving? Are you doing Thanksgiving at your house? I'm like, yeah.
Wait a second. Why was she just like...
Cause she was in Austin and my friend lived in Austin. This lady they were traveling down to San Antonio over Thanksgiving, staying in hotels. Okay. So she's like, I would have her, but she's not going to be in our neck of the woods. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay. And so we had her over. And her son, I had never met him, I was reached out, she came and she was military. We're military. So it's always like, then they know we're background checked and stuff too. Yeah. And then
you're not just burying random people in acreage.
Yeah. And so then it was kind of cool because they came for Thanksgiving and then they were going to be just like obviously going to the Alamo and doing all the San Antonio stuff. So they were going to be here for a while. And then she contacted me and she was staying in a hotel and her car got broken into. Oh, no. And they had all their stuff because they were traveling all over. So then she, had to get her and they'd broken the windshield and everything. And so I was like, why don't you bring your stuff to my garage and store it in there and then bring the car in to get fixed? And then I was like, if you want, you guys can stay with us. Cause she was sick. I'm like, you're sick. And she's like, yeah. And I think I don't know. I wasn't worried about like COVID at the time, but she ended up having like bronchitis or something. But I was like, you might as well stay here and recoup. So then they ended up staying like through Christmas. They came for Christmas.
Wait a second. How long did she stay with you?
Or no, not through Christmas. They left right before Christmas. They stayed through Christmas services. So like the week before Christmas. Then they end up going to...
So they were around for like a month.
Almost a month, yeah. And it was good to just
That's great.
still, but literally that's so where you're like, where do you meet people?
Okay.
It's like they come if you have that.
If you build it, they will come.
Yes. No, and I really did like moving to Texas and we're like, do we live on base? What are we going to do? And we were definitely like, well, kind of wanting to live on base. But at the time I was reading in Isaiah and that verse about like enlarge your house, build an addition, spread out your home. I was like, that's us for a time at least. I was like, let's really just have space that people can come and make that a priority. And so instead of like investing in vacationing and stuff, we kind of stretched it with our house to be our vacation and try to make it where like people want to come hang out here. And every house we kind of do that. Stacey's been to almost all my houses, but I try and make it where it's got a fire pit. It's got something that is a draw for like company to just come in, chill, do some sort of project like that. But
that's awesome.
I don't know where else they come from.
Right. So what do you think is the definition of hospitality? What does that mean?
I think hospitality is just like opening up, and it's different than like generosity. You know what I mean? But it's more like having them in your home, in your environment.
Inviting people in?
Yes. And it's giving literally what you have versus not just out of your abundance, because you're going to give them like a bed. You're going to give them food that you might only have made this much food. You're going to make it work instead of like a lot of times generosity can be, I already have set aside what I need and I'm going to give above that. But this is like giving of all you have, and there's times when it's like, who knows what you're going to get for a meal? It would depend on when payday was.
Yeah. The working definition of it from the dictionary is the friendly and generous reception and entertainment of guests, visitors, or strangers. And the Bible, when the Bible talks about practice hospitality, I think of you, I've thought of you, Dolly, in the past when I've read that. Because you're so good at, there's a few people, Lois is actually really good at hospitality too. And she said it came from practicing it. But here's always my hang up, even though the Bible says practice hospitality and all these things, like, although I try, here's sometimes the problem. I'm not the only one that lives at this house. So I want to know, like, how has your husband come on board, your kids come on board? How have you gotten like pushback from them about it? How does that look? Like those dynamics.
I agree with that. Like I inherited it a little bit. My mom was definitely like generous with her time, and my parents did model holidays not just being about the family. They were about who else does not have somebody to celebrate with. So I learned that from them, but then I'm marrying and I marry somebody who I'm like, so geez, you guys have people over a lot. And he was like, never, like never. And I was like, okay, how are we going to? But he had been around my family so much. He was like, oh yeah, this is what we want to do. But I do get pushback. Easter, I got pushback this year just because.
Tell me about it.
I was like, oh, it's going to be small. So I was like, our son had just gotten married last summer. So I was like, let's have her family over, see if they would come. Okay. So like I invite them. Yep. They're a yes. Well, then Micah had a friend and I was like, what about his family? Cause they just PCS'd from Florida. So I knew they didn't have family.
Can you,
and
what's
then
PCS?
Oh,
just
permanent change of station.
Okay. So military.
So that means like they just moved, probably don't have support unit yet intact. And so then Bella was like, I'm going to invite my friend. And I was like, her whole family, and make sure that her whole family knows they can come. She's like, okay. So then invited them, and the kids were like, why do you always have to do randoms? Can't you invite from the same where they know each other? They were like, this could get awkward. And I was like,
did it get
I
awkward?
think it'll be fine. It's a big enough house.
Yeah.
And after, like, we kind of debriefed sometimes, and they were like, this is great.
Yeah.
They were like, it was totally good. Everybody really connected and, hung out. And so I thought it was great,
So they learned I should trust my mother.
Sort of. Well, and I learned
not that there won't be pushback in the future, right? Because it's this perceived, and I think this is the hang up for a lot of people. I think you actually kind of hit the nail on the head there. The perceived awkwardness or the perceived what ifs, unknowns, that kind of thing. People are like, I'd rather just maybe not deal with that. So let's just keep to ourselves or only to people that we know.
I do. I definitely learned. The kids are like, you need to do better at communicating when you invite, saying, hey, and it could be others. You know what I mean? So that you give people the freedom to know what they're walking into instead of,
right.
Thinking they're coming into, there's going to be 10 of us and there's 25 of us.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely need to work on that, on my communication for sure.
I think it's so funny that being a military family, I'm like, mission parameters, and then you do debriefing after. So, I mean, you got this.
Yes. We kind of do. We sit around, we're like, how did that go?
Yeah.
Do you feel like everybody kind of connected? And
I'm curious now, though, like, did you debrief after I left? And you were like, should we allow her to come back next May if she asks?
You've been around too long. There's nothing else to say. They're like, yep, here she comes, But it is interesting because, like, we moved here to Texas and we've been here like 5 years. And so when I was back in Washington, a friend of ours was like, what do you miss the most about Washington? And I was like, being around people that I've known 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
I said, it is different. We had never lived where we don't know anybody.
What do you think the big difference is?
The big difference is you don't have that support. Like, I remember Ross having to text his new boss and say, can we put you down for an emergency contact? We know nobody here.
Right.
And it forces you either. So then we moved on base and I was like, I'm going to love it because we're all in the same boat and everybody's going to want to like hang out and we're going to like barbecue all the time. It's going to be wonderful. And we move on there and I was like, they're all to themselves. Well, then we realized times have changed and people don't, because they're military and most of them are only going to be here 2 years, 3 years. Their support is still their family. Times have changed. Their parents fly in. They go home for holidays. There isn't that, like, I need face-to-face contact. And you see it more and more with the kids where I'm like, who are you hanging out with? Are you like, I have one who's really social and she's like out the door all the time with the friends. And I have one who's a gamer and his interaction is his talking to them, people in Minnesota or whatever, that I'm like, it still is important to have that.
Yeah.
For me, for my kids to see that there's certain things you learn only through face to face and dealing with the friends, the hurts, everything, it's all one big thing. And so I think it's important. And so I'm always like, I don't know if Stacey would say I'm like a hover parent, but I definitely like to have my kids have their friends over here versus them going out, and I think part of it is we know this is safe. They're not going to get into pornography, alcohol, drugs, whatever. They're not going to find it here where I found a lot of that stuff at my friend's house. You know what I mean? Like,
same. My first time I ever drank was because my friend's dad had a full bar in the basement of their house and both of the parents worked and were gone all the time. So we had all of this free time with this free liquor, right? So what kind of environments are you creating for the kids to be around and in? And I wouldn't consider you a helicopter parent by any means at all. Actually, I wouldn't at all. You're usually forcing them to get out the door and have wings and go and just trusting the Lord's going to protect them. But I appreciate the fact that you open up your house because when I was out there, even there was a kid that came over, a friend of her kids, whatever, but like her kid wasn't there, just the friend was there, hanging out with me and Dolly and talking. And I got to know Isaiah quite well. I really love the kid.
Yeah.
He seems like a nice kid.
He just told me, he's like, he's like, how do I follow her on Instagram? I'm like, don't know if she's on there, but here's her name.
Yeah. So I think it's great to have houses and environments where kids feel welcome to come and just be themselves, that they can come and say, like, I feel like this is home. Yeah, I think it's really important. I love that you do that.
And we make it a point to try and like get to know the kid's family. Isaiah's, he's a friend of Gabe's and Gabe was, either at basic or tech school. And I was like, we're having Isaiah's family over.
Mm-hmm.
We need to meet his family.
Mm-hmm.
If at all possible, we try to. When he went to basic, he had a friend that had stayed the night, and then Gabe left, and this DJ ended up staying for like a month. And I'm like, where are your parents? Like, they've not contacted me. I've never met your parents, and he's like, well, my mom's with my grandma who's sick and my dad's really busy. And I was like, okay, I need you to at least, you can stay here, but you need to go home and like check in with your dad.
Yeah.
And yeah, he stayed for a month.
It's literally the opposite of those commercials that they used to play on TV that at 10 o'clock that said, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your kids are? And you're just like, it's 2023. And like, do you know where your parents are?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I try and like at least one time have the parents over and kind of connect with them so that if they're not concerned, to at least put them at ease if they ever get concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And are they pretty
on.
receptive? Have they always been receptive to come the times that you've done it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say in general, when I ask people, I have one of Gabe's friends, his mom, I like met her at church and we had just started going there and I was like, oh, can I get your number? I'll have you over for coffee. And then she's like, yep. And she gives me her number and I texted her and no response. So then I was like, okay. So then I saw her at church and I was like, I think I got your wrong number. Can I get your number again? And she's like, sure. So I get it. And I was like, oh, this is the right number. And she's like, yeah. And so then I was like, okay. So then I did it again, asked her again, and then no response. And so I have like a 3. Yeah. But some people are just like that, or they're busy. I kind of do. Yeah. Where I believe in pursuing relationship and discipleship, all that. Mm-hmm. But I only have limited time. And so in general, I'll only ask 3 times. Mm-hmm. And if they can't work me in their schedule, cause I'll be like, when are you available? I try new people like right at the beginning of the month where I have a pretty open calendar for them to choose what works for them. But after that, I'm like, I don't know. I just don't really take it personal. I'm like, oh, they must be. I try and give people the benefit of the doubt, or either that I'm just like, it's never me. Like I'm never the problem. I don't know what my problem is. But
that's where your like extreme self-confidence comes from. You're like, it must be them. Every time she's like, it must be them.
It's like the mom, I didn't know, then literally 6 months later, Gabe brings in this friend and I'm like, I think I know your mom. And he's like, everybody knows my mom. I was like, oh yeah, I do. Yeah. And since then, it's not like she's now she definitely knows me because our kids are friends.
Yeah.
And she's told me, she's like, I really appreciate you pouring into my son and whatever.
Yeah. So why do you think, I want to try to explore this from both sides. Why do you think hospitality is hard for some people, like hostessing? And then why do you think hospitality is hard for some people, like being hosted? Both sides of that.
Both sides?
Yeah.
I think the hosting is it is a lot. It's tiring and it's expensive.
Mm-hmm. Expectations, maybe?
And the expectation of like clean house.
Yeah.
Cause I'll tell you what, like we've had 100, 250 people through our door in the 5 years, whether we've had 40 or 50 people hosting something or just a family. Yes. And they do. And they overlap. Then they have to, I'm like, you got to get used to, we can't just host you. We're having people over. But in the 5 years, we have been invited, I would say maybe 2 times.
Wow.
I'm thinking if it's 2. Yeah. I know of 1 is what sticks out in my mind.
And you went?
Oh, of course.
And of course, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm like, oh my gosh, we were invited. But I think why we don't get invited, I always told myself it's because like when we lived in Washington, we had a friend, they had 6 kids and we had 5 kids. So they're over at our house. We would go back and forth. Mm-hmm. I was like, we don't get invited anywhere. And he's like, too many kids. We don't either. It's just like too many mouths to feed. Mm-hmm. And I remember that growing up. my mom having a lot of people in the home. And I remember like only one very vividly, the Lehman-Tynans having us over. It was a big deal because we were such a big family that I think for some people it's just like overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all of it, thinking about what would I serve to, you got to be social to do it.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not going to lie either. So I am social and I do like having people over to my house. My one hesitation every time that I think about is I like to go to bed early. And I am always afraid people are going to stay. And like, how do you kindly say, I did come up with something. Once I'm done, I just say, thanks for coming. That's where I like lead with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. It's been so great. Kind of like get up, like walk up and start like walking towards your front door. Hint, hint.
Oh, so for us, cause Ross gets up early.
Yeah.
If it's a Sunday night, a lot of times it's a Sunday evening and stuff. And he's like, I gotta be up for work. And so sometimes I'm like, oh, good, you're going to be in this with me. And sometimes he's like, all right, good to see you guys. He's like, I got to get to bed. And he leaves and they stay in. So then it's me.
What do you do?
Then you're on by yourself?
I'm on by myself. But I'm a night owl where it's okay for me. I can outlast like anybody, Stacey knows.
Oh yeah. I always call it every time I'm there. I'm just like, I got to go to bed. Like that one night we stayed up until I don't know what.
Yeah. Cause I had friends come.
Yeah. Your pastor was over.
Yeah.
His wife had fallen asleep in the lazy boy on the other side of the living room.
They were visiting, they live out of town now. And so I had told Stacey, oh yeah, I'm going to have another.
Yeah, they were staying there
here too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, funny.
Here's the great thing about that trip. The first time I went out there. So these people were staying there and she had told me and it's just like, okay, cool, whatever. And then they leave and this little girl's still there. And I was like, who's this? And I can't remember her name. I should.
Bree.
I spent 3 days with her, Bree. And so basically everywhere we went, we just like had this girl with us. So like that was our whole trip because these people were like at the big AOG conference or whatever. And so Dolly was babysitting and I was just like, does this girl like live here or like what's the deal?
She acted like she did.
Yeah, she did. I thought that was her house. I mean, I'm like, did you adopt a kid I don't know about? Like, that's how hospitable Dolly is. It's just like, oh yeah, didn't I tell you? I have this.
Yeah, she used to call me mom. Too. And
cute kid. Super
she
cute
finally
kid.
just started calling me Dolly,
Yeah, recently.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just, I think because too, I am privileged to stay at home. And so I have the time to like, make the meal, to clean the house, to prepare for company.
Mm-hmm.
And I try, as much as possible not to like put it all on my kids or whatever that I'm like, I mean, they definitely will help. And I always try and have my house where I feel like I'm okay with somebody just knocking on the door and walking in, or sometimes they don't knock and they just come in. But, that you have to get to a point where you're like, I'm not so rigid about how the house has to look, but I'm also not going to just let it go where I have a problem, where it bothers me. If somebody
shows up,
I dropped the ball. Yeah.
Yeah. It can't become an obstacle to allowing people in the door.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think like, as far as on the flip side, like why would people not go over? I don't really run into that in like literally, I would say that's very rare. I would say once a year.
That one lady,
I've had another one and I just think a lot of people, they can be like, do they have dogs? But I would ask, I guess. I'd be like, oh, cause even when I invite people and I don't know them, I'm like, great, any food allergies?
Yeah.
Or major dislikes? I always ask.
That's really a good question.
And stuff. Cause I can cook gluten free if I need to or whatever. I will definitely try and accommodate to allergies and stuff like that. And so I don't really know why they don't come.
Yeah. I think for me, sometimes being in the position I am at the church, I get invited to a lot more things now than I've ever got invited to. And I just don't have as much bandwidth because I also am working. So I have to be picky and choosy about what I can like really do and still maintain, I have a husband and I have kids and I have a house and I have all this stuff I have to take care of. So you can only have so many friends at one time. It's just the reality. And some people have enough friends, they have enough support system, they have enough whatever, and they don't have the bandwidth to build a new relationship at that moment, like they're good. And I think that just sometimes it might just show that they're good.
Right.
And they're in a place where they should be practicing hospitality to others, right? Maybe because they can maybe invite someone into their friend group, but they don't necessarily need to be in someone else's. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally could be it.
But my question from something you had said previously is you said something along the lines of, although I like to practice hospitality and discipleship, when you do practice hospitality, do you feel like you have a mindset of discipleship always, or just with some people, or are they two totally separate things, the hospitality and discipleship?
I look at them different. I think more as far as evangelism, definitely like anybody who comes over just in conversation, they will know that we're Christian, and that we have a relationship with the Lord, that it's important in our family. Cause I'll even not over at our house, I'll be like, oh, cool. I'm like a family that just, that PCS. I'm like, cool. Do you have a support group yet? Do you have people that Not really. I was like, do you go to church typically? I always ask. And if they're like, no, I'm like, oh, okay. If you're ever interested, I've been to a few, and we took January till March this year and just went to different churches. And that was part of the reason why, because I wanted to, if somebody was like, oh, I had somebody that was like, oh yeah, but I'm looking for more of a Black Baptist. And I was like, okay, now I know of one. I can tell her, be like, hey, I know of one that might be a good fit, might be worth checking out, that they're great people. And we also like to see where's the body at as a whole, church, capital C, that we think it's super important for us, for our kids to not get stuck in a bubble of this is it.
The church.
Yep. That this is the church and these are your people. I get concerned if they don't have friends outside of church too, or acquaintances and stuff like that, that I'm like, I want to know that you guys are friendly to all and reaching out to all, and
that you're in the world, but not of the world type of thing.
Right. And they'll talk about it. I mean, they talk about people, having people over that they're like, did you hear what they said? I'm like, yep. I mean, they get it, but I want them to see the difference too. Why do we make the choices we make? And
so question that goes along with that then. You went and visited all these churches. What was hospitality like? Did you encounter any some like are more open and, you got invited home for dinner at some place, or? Yeah, we definitely, I would say in general, most of the time you're going to find that in the smaller churches. Okay.
That the larger ones, it's more fill out this connect card and then we'll have somebody on our staff reach out to you, is kind of the mentality.
Right. Is it partly because they literally don't know that you're a stranger?
Maybe.
It
definitely could, because there's just so many that you don't.
Yeah.
How do you, so it's a lot more like that versus more structured.
I've got to clarify this though. How many people do you consider a small church?
Yeah. So I consider a small church 500.
Right. Because
600.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So I kind of thought that.
Yeah. We were going to what we still considered not a mega church by any means around here, and it was 6,000.
Oh my
and
word.
So to us, that's not
mega.
No, they consider that like a mini mega.
It's like a mini mega. Yeah. And so it's different. And so your expectations are different. Like, what are you looking for? Are you looking for people to do life with? Are you looking to just go and like hear a really good word and to get fed on Sundays? What are you looking for? Are you looking for a place that needs your help to get involved and to serve, or different opportunities and stuff like that? So yeah, I guess clarifying small church.
Because around here, our church is about 500 and it's like one of the biggest churches around, and everyone says it's a really big church. I've even heard people say, although I think the church is great, it's too big for us, and they want to go find a smaller church. And so when they're talking about that, a lot of the smaller churches are more like 100 people.
Yeah. And it's such a big area here though, whether it's Gateway about that size, Westover about that size, and you're out in if I'm doing food pantry downtown and I was like, oh, I'm part of Gateway, they're like, I've never heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
It is not, you have to be in the 10, 15, 20,000 even to get to be known around
I
here.
cannot believe the sizes of those churches and their signs, even along the freeway. It's just that whole everything is bigger in Texas thing is no joke.
It's true. Yeah.
It's no joke.
And they're full, and I think that's one thing too, is what I learned. We went from being in Washington and the least churched county in America. And then we come down here, and at about the same time, I have a friend that was planting in Austin. And my father-in-law, who was a pastor in Washington and then was one in South Carolina, and he was like, just so you know, it is going to be a very different being in the Bible Belt, And I was like, I don't know what that means. And now I know what that means. It's that the churches are full. You do not have a problem getting people to go to church. It is in accountability, discipleship that you really see a need, is in going deeper.
Are you saying do you think there's a lot of cultural Christianity there and not true conversion?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That everybody goes to church, and then everybody goes and lives their life, Yeah. I mean, I went to a prayer meeting and
they hear the word, but they don't.
Oh, for sure. Or it's just, it is the culture. I go to a prayer meeting and right when I moved here and they're like, pray for my grandson. He killed somebody. And somebody else is like, pray for my grandson. He's serving 20 years. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to pray that they surrender their lives to the Lord. And they're like, no, they're church. They grew up in the church. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
It's just a different mindset.
Yeah.
That they're like, we established that already. It's just they're struggling. And I'm like, murder is a major struggle.
Yeah. Is that a case of, Jesus says, blessed are those who hear the word of God and keep it?
Yeah, I think, yeah. And
we hear it, but we're not actually hearing it.
Yeah. And I think the culture here, what I heard a lot was sow your wild oats.
Okay.
So their culture is you raise them in the church, and then they definitely their later high school, college years, it's really go and experience the world, the things of the world. And then they're like, but God promised me they'll come back. And so then they like to see it, in their 40s, late 30s, 40s. They like to see their kids come back to church and start to settle down from their lifestyle.
Well,
the sad thing is you see a lot of missed opportunity for victory in their life in that college age. And then you see a lot of them not come back. I think
and
that's
so many wounds
too.
And scars. Oof. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's interesting just being around that culture more.
Question then. So you have, people coming into your house that might be from this kind of culture, from Texas and whatever. And so when you're thinking about discipleship, do you have more of a discipleship mindset than with those younger ones that are coming in that have been raised in the church, that you're probing and asking those questions to see if they've really come to true conversion and kind of discipling them in that? Or?
Yeah, if it's where they're over quite a bit or whatever, then I start to ask, where are you at with your relationship with the Lord? Are you in the Word? Do you have accountability? It'll just be, and sometimes it's just having conversation with other people, and our kids' friends will be around and they'll hear. And, one of them was Gabe and I were talking, and then he pipes up. He's like, I don't think I should have voted. And I was like, really? It's such a privilege. Why? My husband's in the military. It's a privilege to have that opportunity. But he was like, cause I didn't know anything. He's like, I just voted who I thought to vote for, who is the most popular candidate. And everybody was hyped over. And so a lot of times the discipleship comes and being like, can I ask you where you get your influences from? Where you're like, how did you know?
Okay. So it takes an organic form.
It takes definitely the conversation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Having them be around, but then be curious about their lives and be curious about where they're at. Ask them questions and see where that leads.
Yeah. And just being like, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's like, I'm struggling in this area, and whether it's relationship, work, school, that they are looking for people to engage with them.
Mm-hmm.
That I think kids are like starving for it. And I think adults are starving for it.
I was going to say
just
that.
a little bit different.
Yeah.
It takes a little while. Their guards up a little bit more. And then I'll be like, let me know if you want to do a Bible study or something, and try and like plug them in somewhere, whether it's with me or else not with me.
So something that I see is that by letting people into your house and like giving them food and letting them be comfortable and kind of make it their own in a way, like feeling very welcomed, might drop that defense, that wall that they have up where they don't want to let people in because of vulnerability and all that. As they're in the house and around you and your family, they start to feel comfortable and loved. And then they're more open to even be able to talk about these things and be able to receive truth from you if they need a word of correction or just engagement. You know, it's
sure.
like the hospitality leads to that vulnerability, I feel like.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps. It's a lot easier over a cup of coffee than sitting at church trying to do that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And try and get them like, where are you at? What are you doing? You know, that it takes definitely relationship.
It shows you care. It shows you really care if you're going to take the time and open up your home.
Yeah. So even like, and we do believe, I do invite people to church, but I don't know if I've ever invited somebody to church other than like the neighbors. They'll do an Easter basket with cards in it or whatever, you know, like that, multiple ones.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, if they like answer the door or whatever, I'll be like, hey, you know, we'd love to have you for dinner on Sunday too. Come to church with us and then come over for dinner. So that is when I cook on like Sundays, is if I have somebody that wants to do that, then I'll do a Sunday dinner for them and whatever.
Have you ever read the book by Rosario Butterfield, The Gospel Comes with a House Key?
No.
It's so crazy because so many of the things that you do and the way that you are is so similar to what she says in the book. I think you'd actually really enjoy it. It's not a very long read, but it's pretty good. And she came out of like the LGBTQ whatever through a pastor and his wife inviting her over for dinner to interview about some book she was writing.
Yeah.
And then comes to faith and then goes through the whole, like how she shared it with her neighborhood and how it's super interesting. So
it is. So that's what I thought when Ross and I got together. I'm like, this is going to be great. Your dad's a pastor and your mom's a pastor's wife.
Yeah.
You know what this is. Well, his mom had cancer since he was 8. So I just don't know that she had the energy, and she worked and stuff, you know, that to do that. But I was like, okay, how are we going to like mesh that?
Mm-hmm.
And he's definitely now where he will start to invite a coworker over and his family, that we had them over for dinner and stuff too, because I want to see him doing it too. Yeah. That it's not always me, you know, that I'm like, you're the one who's out there. Like you see people every day. I'm like, I see the Schwan's men. Which I invited when it was a lady. I was like, do you want to come and have pasty?
You invited your Schwan?
I invited her for pasties. Yeah, but she was working, but I gave her one. I was like, do you want one anyways? You know, cause they're like, what are you making? They can smell it.
Yeah.
It smells up your whole house.
Yeah.
So.
I love that.
Oh, that's hilarious.
She loved them. By the way, it was your recipe, Stace.
Yeah. Awesome. I know. I think you texted me that day. How long and what temp do you cook these on?
I know. I do.
So write that down. 350, 1 hour.
So.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
So I was looking up the word hospitable, hospitality, like just cause, you know, I'm a word nerd. One of the roots is, I don't know how you pronounce this. Is it Latin? I'm not sure what it is. It's ghosty. Ghosti.
Yeah.
And that means stranger, guest, or host. There's like 3 different So we have stranger, guest, or host. And it says properly, it's someone with whom one has reciprocal duties of hospitality. So this is a mutual exchange. They're getting dinner, but you're hosting, having company. So there's this back and forth kind of relationship that has to do with hospitality, whether you're the host or the guest.
Yeah.
I see that, right? Because when you do host, there is a certain joy that comes along with it.
Yeah.
Whether it's in the midst of it or after the fact.
Yeah.
You got something from that you couldn't have got any other way.
Oh, for sure. I think it definitely is. Even where scripture's like, it's more or less to give than receive. And you're like, yeah, right. Kind of.
Yeah.
And then you start getting into it and you're like, it's really true.
Yeah.
That I find more fulfillment having people around and stuff. And I don't know if part of that too is like I said at the beginning, I'm from a family of 13 kids. And so we are used to more of a clan mentality that you have people in and out. And my parents, my mom, I would definitely say like modeled generosity. My dad more generosity, my mom more the hospitality.
One thing I hear from people, and I mean, I can be guilty of saying this as well, whether it's you're trying to build a friendship or you're trying to invite people to be a part of something or whatever, that people will come, but they get discouraged at a certain period of time because it's not reciprocal. Like Lois said something about it being reciprocal. And I think, yeah, definitely in the moment it's reciprocal. But when
you don't get invited,
you already said, I invite,
yes.
and I can count on like maybe one, maybe two, and you've had 250 or whatever in. So like what in the world keeps it from being, I don't know. I don't get that really. Right. So my experience here in New Hampshire has been both where like I've invited trying to make friends and find my way here and not have it be reciprocal. And at a certain period of time, you just say, well, okay, obviously this isn't a two-way street. So this is not what I would consider a friendship. So I guess it just was what it was. And I just let it go. I might run into the person and chit chat when I see them in public. There's been a few though that I've invited them over and then they've in turn invited us over. And now it's become this super back and forth thing. And we've developed really strong friendships within our families because of it. So I've seen both, but I know how discouraging it can get. So how is it that you keep yourself from being discouraged thinking I'm always giving and I'm never being invited?
I think it is too, like people will be like, oh, it's because your house is set up for company. Mine's not set up for company. And I think that it's that you have to be, okay, I do realize I validate that my house is easier. It's easier to have them here a lot of the time, especially when, little, I had a special needs son and I realized that it can be overwhelming with bringing that whole into the picture too and stuff. But I think I don't get discouraged by, it depends on the situation. If it's like you're either connecting with these people that you're like, okay, yeah, that was really good. How we talk about like debriefing when the kids are like, we got to have them over again. That was so fun. Then I'm like, for sure, if you can have people and it not be this connection, and that's okay too. You still are like, oh, God's got somebody else to fill that role in them. And so I don't know. Sometimes it does get discouraging. You're just like, oh, I wish, like, what is it about? And I don't really have the answer for it. So I can't really dwell on it. I'm just like, I don't know, has to be an okay response to it,
Right.
And so I don't know why they don't invite people over, but they're realizing they're missing out too on that.
Yeah. I have a lot the same situation here. Our house is very well planned for company because, we've built a couple houses, and even already when we built our first house, we were living in a little, 2-bedroom trailer house, old mobile home.
And you guys had us over all the time.
We had
little tiny spaces.
Many people. Yes. We had so many people in our apartment, in the first apartment we lived in out here. We had so many people around, and I was like, we need to build, when we build our houses, we need to build planning on, and it wasn't that they necessarily, it was mostly local people. So there wasn't a lot of overnight guests, especially when our kids were little, but it was multiple times a week. There was a night that would get together and play games, or there was a night, like every night of the weekend for sure. Friday, Saturday, Sunday was happening.
And at your house all the time.
Not always, but
Not
I mean,
always,
we switched back and forth.
Yeah.
We went to other people's little tiny mobile homes too, but you know, it was great. It was awesome. Mm-hmm. And I think learning how to host in a less than ideal home gave me a sense of it's not about the home.
It's not.
Yep.
It's about the friendship and the relationship. And I can make tuna sandwiches. I mean, we'd do tuna melts and chips and apples. And I mean, that was dinner, you know, or we'd get together. And when we had a bunch of friends, it was like, I'll bring something.
Right.
So it ends up being this potluck sort of, you brought fruit and somebody else brought chips and the person in,
I love that you brought attention to this because both, and I knew you in the shop before you built your big house, Lois, and I've known Dolly where she's had people over, and that one house was so tiny and you could like open the window and like shake hands with your neighbor. The houses were so tight together.
Yeah.
You know, you've lived in small houses too. And I've never even put this together because both of you are really great at hospitality. Me, not as much. I'm still practicing, you know, but I love that you talk about how you had smaller places and you did. And part of the reason you end up with these bigger places is because you see what's happened in this small place and you want to accommodate this because this has so much joy. This is so much importance in your life that you're creating a space. And so some people might come into your life later and see, well, you have a house that's set up to host. Well, you have and yeah, it's true. It's true because you were doing it in the small spaces and saw the value in it. So you might have sacrificed in one area to accommodate in another, which I think is beautiful. And I hope it speaks to anyone listening that you start in your small space. Like you don't wait until you have the big thing. You start in your small space and practice small because it's going to probably grow from there as your space grows.
Yes. Absolutely.
I think so too. And I think it's even like teaching my kids, because the older ones are boys, that, hey, if you get invited over, if you're going to go hang out at a friend's house, you bring something. I love hearing like Gabe and his wife are going over to somebody's for dinner and Tori's like, I got to bring a dessert. I'm going to bring salad. She likes my lasagna, so she learned how to make lasagna. And then she's like, this is my meal. So she's like, I try and get on the food train first. So I get to put what I'm bringing.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm like, you don't need a lot of different options. She feels very confident in making the lasagna now and bringing it. And I think that it helps for kids to have the confidence in what they're serving and what they're bringing to the table.
But let me say, if you're not a cook or a baker, though, there is no shame in saying, can I bring the drinks, the paper products?
For sure.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
So the boys, I would be like, bring chips and
and salsa. Yeah.
You know, I was like, bring something. And one thing that we have learned down here is we would have our small group over and it's, you know, maybe 40, 50 people. And then
that's a small group. Wait a second. Wait a second. So some churches here are 40 to 50 people, period. And your small group is 40 to 50.
So Jacob and Nikki's, it was like 40, 50 people. We hadn't been going very long, but they lived in our neighborhood. And then I ran into Nikki at Walmart and she's like, is there any way we had them? They were doing small group at the park. It was COVID. And then it was just loosening up here. So that'd have been like October. I ran into her in the end of November at Walmart because right when we went to the park, I invited them over that weekend. I'm like, do you want to come and eat? Like, we got to get to know these people. What if they're crazy? You know? And so we invite them in and it was good. And then she's like, do you want to host a Christmas party? I was like, sure. Don't know anybody but you guys really, but sure. So there's 40, 50 people. Well, then one thing that I've learned is culturally down here, if they don't bring food, they bring you gifts.
Oh.
And so that my kids realize somebody brings chocolates, they bring flowers, they bring a plant, they bring a gift card, something. So culturally down here, it is just like it's like Miss Dolly or yes sir, yes ma'am. I think they do a good job in general of acknowledging the host.
That's awesome.
That we appreciate that. And that is not something that I really saw in Minnesota, Washington, where we've lived and because it's happened multiple times.
Yeah, no, it wasn't really in our culture. I mean, it was in our culture to bring food. Like it was always potluck style. I think potlucks probably originated in the Midwest. I have to believe this because I mean, we did potluck weddings. We did potluck everything. Like, I mean, There was no cater to anything. Everything was a potluck.
Yeah.
I mean, your crock pot was your best friend in the Midwest.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then my sister-in-law coming to visit from South Korea, every time she comes, she brings some kind of special gift to give to us because she's staying at the house. And I'm always just like, why does she? And Ed's brother was like, in their culture, you never go and stay at someone's house without bringing them like a nice gift.
Yeah.
Yep.
A host gift or whatever. And I was like, oh, sorry, Dolly. I didn't get you a gift when I came and stayed with you for a few days. What a slacker I am. I'm sure you were just like, she's from the Midwest. I expect nothing.
Yeah.
No, and then one thing too is even like my brother has been like, oh, if he sees he's kicked a kid out, which isn't the case anymore. Like I have a guest room now, but he'll leave him $20. So my kids love it. Yeah.
Of course.
They're like,
I'll give up my room for a few days for $20.
Yeah. And so I think the big thing is even just with the kids is really like talking to them and being like, it's important that even Bella, if she goes to a friend's pool party, it's like, bring a couple bags of chips, bring something. Don't go empty handed. Offer to help in the kitchen, whatever.
That was ingrained into me for sure.
Yep.
I'm starting to be like, okay, I do that. I'm starting to get a little defensive over here because I feel like you guys are almost like having a talk to with me. Like, we need to talk to you.
No, and I
know.
You know, like, no, and I know that's not your intention, but I'm just saying I'm feeling like slightly convicted that I need to up my game a little bit. That's all I'm saying.
I'm feeling the same way. So just.
Yeah, I think your mom and dad invited us, you know, when we probably just had Josiah, like young, married. I remember what she made. I loved it. It was her chicken lasagna. And then she called
it Mexican lasagna, by the way.
Her Mexican lasagna because she used tortilla shells for the noodles.
Yeah.
And she gave me a book, like wrote out the recipe in a journal and gave it to me. And that and like the bread that she made and the cheddar bay biscuits, you know, all of it. And so then I had that book forever. And would add to it and whatever. Well, then the book was just tattered. And I remember her like staying with me one time and she's like, I didn't mean for you to keep it your whole life. She's like, these need to go in your recipe binder. You have this binder. So she sat for hours and like wrote out any recipes that I had in that book and added them to my binder for me.
Oh, nice.
I have that in me.
So
do I have that in me? Yeah. Because now my daughter, I don't think my daughter listens to my podcast. So I'll just say it. My daughter was just like, I have a handwritten recipe book that I use. So like I use recipes and whatnot, but I'll alter them based off of the way that we like to do things. And then once I get them, as long as they're a fan favorite, which means the majority of the people like them, they go into my recipe book. And so I have my own personal one and it's looking pretty gross at this point.
Yep.
Especially like the Mongolian beef page because it splatters lots of soy sauce and whatnot if it's near like what I'm cooking because of the oil and whatnot. So I was like, I need to redo this. And I was thinking, I think I'll get 2 and I'll do 2 of them at the same time so I can give one to my daughter because she mentioned when she moved, shoot, I don't have your recipes, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
So that is what I did for Tori when she and Gabe got married. I ordered a recipe binder like I would love, way nicer than mine. So I started writing out just recipes like Ross's grandma's whole wheat bread and then my grandma's banana bars or, you know what I mean? My mom's dinner rolls and started compiling. And then I have on my fridge, I'm sure you've seen it, Stacey, like a list of, it's maybe like 60 meals and it's like Italian, Mexican, soups, whatever. And so I try and pull one from each category for the week. You know what I mean? Like grill, Ross has a list for options to get ideas and stuff. So then I had her and Gabe, I was like, sit down and star what you guys like, what you want. I don't want to write all these recipes. If you don't want them, that's fine, you know? And then, so they did that. And so we did one for them. Well, then my niece was down this last week and she was going through my recipe binder and she's like, I want your recipes. She's 22. And living on her own and starting to cook more and stuff. So then I was like, oh, I have one because when I was making Tori's, Josiah, he was building a house at the time and he's like, I want a recipe binder too. I want that for my house. Cause he will call and say like, how do I make pizza roll? How do I make spaghetti? You know, and my kids, I tried to at like usually like 12, 13 for 6, 8 months, have them in the kitchen with me on Tuesdays. I wanted them to know how to like prepare meat properly and stuff like that. And then, so we'd make a meal and then the next week they'd make it and make sure they knew they could do basic stuff. And so he's like, I want your recipes. Well, I was like, I have a binder. I haven't started it. Cause even Tori's, I probably put like 100 recipes in there. And I was like, this is so much work, you know, let me know what else you want. I was like, I'm done. Like, it's too much writing. So then Chloe was like, oh, well, we're not going to write them. Well, I'll type them all in and we're going to print them off. Well, then she's like, no, actually, when I looked at Tori's, because Tori let her use it, because I said, use Tori's. You can't copy my recipes because I've switched them in my head.
Yeah,
you know,
I do too.
I haven't written that down yet.
Right.
Yeah.
But Tori's are like my recipes now. So she's like, okay, so Tori brings hers over and Chloe's like, I guess I want it all handwritten too. I like that better.
Well, and plus
like,
your handwriting's so nice.
No, so I'm like, are you kidding me? So I have, and then she's like, I'm just going to take Josiah's binder. And since you haven't started that, and then I'll order him a new one.
I have a solution for you guys. 2 words.
What?
Google Drive.
Yeah. But they're not handwritten then.
They're not handwritten. That's what I thought. I said, can't we just take Tori's and or go photocopy them on thick paper, whatever you need to do to get the same. So I'm still kind of working on her because it is a ton of work.
There is something special about having them handwritten though, especially, can I just say, like, after like your mom dies. Yeah, you know, to like flip to a recipe and it's handwritten by them. There's something about it. So,
but you can have that little binder that has grandma's handwriting and mom's handwriting and auntie, whoever's handwriting, and you just
scan them.
Yes. And then you have them in your Google Drive, and yet you still have the originals in the binder that you never get Mongolian soy sauce on.
Yeah. And Gabe said, he's like, do you know how nice it would be to have that at the grocery store?
Oh yeah.
Pull it up on your phone and you know, the ingredients are right there too.
Yeah.
So he was kind of trying to talk her into that way. And I would like them because I have a lot of my recipes now on my phone and stuff like that too. My recipes are like everywhere.
Yeah.
And
it's so funny though. Some of the ones you make forever, like I can go grocery shopping for the recipe without the recipe.
For sure. Yeah.
But that comes with 25 years of making dinners, right?
Yep. But it is really refreshing to see that younger generation interested in it again. Cause I think that there is just a time when it's like, no, I'm too busy and foods, you know, I can get this. The grocery store will prepare it for me.
Do you think that there's a little bit of a switch now because the cost of living has gotten so crazy that they're finding that they have to really start eating at home again? Because for a while there, let's just be honest, like our economy was great. Kids were making money. They had plenty of extra money. We all did. And we could go out to eat more and whatever. And now we're all feeling the squeeze. So we're going out to eat less and less. So we have to prepare from home. Well, if you're going to do it good, right? If you, then you're craving sometimes these things that you grew up with, right? This comfort food, this, whatever.
Yeah. And I think COVID forced people back into the kitchen. You couldn't go out for a little while. That you were either going to order it out and it's like, do I want to pay that or do I want to learn how to make it myself? And it did spark this interest in baking and cooking again.
So I think you're right. I think COVID was the spark that ignited it and started it. And then the inflation the inflation
so now
has
they're like,
made
well,
it
it's a good
stay.
thing I learned. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I like seeing it. And so Chloe's brother is getting engaged and she's like, I really want to start this for him and to give it to the fiance's grandma for her to add her recipes, you know, and that was my intent with Tori too, is I'm like, add your family recipes to this. You know, this isn't just a book from me and it's my recipe book, you know, this is yours, recipe book. This is to like combine you guys.
And guess what? It's like the building blocks of hospitality, right?
Yes.
Like, cause you do have to know how to prepare something. Like, even if it's just one thing, even if it's just lasagna, you know what I mean? Yep. Even if it's just one thing, you know, this one thing. And the other secret weapon to hospitality, I think, is when people say, is there anything I can bring? Never say no. Yeah. You know, never say no.
I'm like, okay, can you bring drinks? And if I already have drinks, those get put back in the back of the thing. Because I think also it commits people to coming. Because the last thing you want is to like prepare this whole meal and then get bailed on.
Yeah.
And it makes them feel like they're partaking in it and not, you know, that it's all of us. And I think it's important for people to feel valued.
Yeah, exactly.
That's part of that reciprocal relationship.
Yep.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I definitely have some that like don't even ask, but I know they're going to bring something. And you've met Jacob and Nikki, who were the ones who stayed and were my community group pastors. Now they've planted a church, so they don't live here. So even if I was still doing like a bigger thing, it was super cool because she was like, what are you up to? I'm like, oh, I'm having people over. I'm having a Bible study. Then she would have cookies delivered or she would have a pie delivered.
Nice.
Just appreciating me doing that, and just saying, I love seeing you walk in your gift. And so it was really cool that she would be like that. And I had never thought of doing that.
Let's tap on that for 1 second. So is it a gift or is it a skill that we all need to learn how to do? Or is it both?
I think, Lois, where in Timothy are they talking about like, cause Lois would know, the gifts.
No pressure.
She's like, Stacey's a little dumb, but Lois might know.
But isn't it in Timothy where they talk about that? If you have the gift of hospitality, then serve or whatever. Is that in there?
Romans, yeah.
Romans?
Yeah.
Why did I think it was in Timothy?
I don't know.
1 Peter 4:9, show hospitality to one another without grumbling.
Not that one.
I know, but I just had to come up with one.
It's like Romans. Is it 15? I think it's 15. It's rejoice.
Romans.
Yeah. It's in the.
Is it Romans?
Yeah, it is. It's Romans 15, but I gotta get there.
It says Romans 12:13. I'm on Google.
Oh, maybe it is 12. Yeah. It is 12. Maybe?
Okay. I don't know why I was thinking it was. But I do think it's just like anything else.
Yes, it's 12. It's 12.
Does it say it's a gift? What it is?
Well, it says we have these gifts. He talks about them being gifts. He says, the heading in my Bible says gifts of grace. It's talking about where we have many members, but we're one body.
Yeah.
Having gifts that differ. So this is Romans 12:6. Having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, in proportion to our faith. If service, in our serving. The one who teaches, in his teaching. The one who exhorts, in his exhortation. The one who contributes, in generosity. The one who leads, with zeal. The one who does acts of mercy, with cheerfulness. Is that the one you were thinking of?
Yeah, because isn't that when I met you in South Carolina, he preached on?
Yes, yes. It was Romans 12, yes.
Yeah.
Living in this gifting, but yet it's not only gifting because like Stacey said, you have to practice it.
Right.
But do you practice all your gifts?
It is acknowledging that it comes easier for some people.
Right.
Yes. But I'm not going to be like, oh, everybody has to do what I'm doing.
No.
Like, why don't you have people over 3 times a week?
Because
it's not your
we're
gift.
all members of a body and we're all different members.
Yep.
Some people are elbows.
Yes. So it is, but it's important too. And you gotta say, that's me.
Yeah.
I'm not the most important part of the body, but I'm going to do my part in the body.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't, if you don't have an elbow, you can't bend your arm, right? And that's,
exactly.
You can't even eat. You're going to die because you can't reach your mouth.
And I think that's what's important is acknowledging. So it puts a little bit of the sting off of people not inviting you because it's, probably not their gifted.
Yes. Right.
Yes.
That you don't know who has
But they'll be doing something else.
Right. Right.
Maybe they're fixing your kid's bike because they know how to fix bikes.
Well, I have this lovely man in the faith that I get to talk to all the time who's in his 80s. So wealth of wisdom. And one time he said, 2 questions I always like to ask someone. What is God doing in you and what is God doing through you? And those are really beautiful things, right? Because it's like what's happening in your times of intimacy with the Lord. What is he showing you and revealing you and prompting you with or whatever, which is always interesting. And then what is he doing through you? Are you, in fact, acting in your giftings that he's given you, whatever that may be? Like the scripture you just read.
Yep.
If in hospitality, then be hospitable. Like if in prophecy, then prophesy. If in exhortation, then by all means exhort. So
that's really good. Yeah.
So gifting and practicing, I think it's a both and thing.
Yeah. And that I think takes the pressure off of people who it doesn't come naturally to be like, you're just practicing. You know, you don't have to be gifted in this. You know, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be the hostess with the mostest. You know what I'm saying? Like that. You just got to practice it once in a while.
Yeah.
And God will like honor that.
And you can do something like, okay, let's go have a picnic at the park. You don't even have to have it in your home, but you're kind of the organizer of it, if you want to say that. Like, let's have a potluck picnic at the park at, 2:00 after church.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, I love organizing event-based like, so if the gift of administration, then by all means administer. So for me, my passion that comes really easy for me is to take random people that all still have the same desire to be in community or to do things together, or maybe even to help with loneliness, things like this, organizing where are we meeting? When are we meeting? What are we doing? Like tonight, I have a random group of people meeting at another friend's house so that we can drive together to go to a line dancing class. And some of these people don't know each other. So it's going to be super fun.
And I think that that's one thing that where I feel like I've grown a little bit is not taking on the pressure of making sure they all have a good time. And like, I have to engage everyone, and I have to like taking so much of that on, especially bigger groups, that I've really been like, they got to do their part. I'm going to do my part and give them opportunity to meet other people.
Yep.
But I'm not going to be the one. I can't babysit you into this relationship. And just stepping back and saying, hey, and I felt like it really happened at Easter. The best thing, I remember my friend Carrie saying, more than hanging out with people, she loves seeing people that she's connected at an event, hang out.
Yes.
She has no, what is it, like FOMO or whatever.
Yeah,
if they go do something without her, she's like, I love it. I love that they have like developed their own, that they're best friends now. She's like, but you have to get to a point where you don't have to be in everything, invited to everything.
Yeah. I just was saying this to someone the other day about my greatest joy is to have friends from different groups that I know they're both looking for the same thing, and finding a space where I can get them to get to know each other. And then they go and do something, and they always try to invite me, right? Because I'm the common denominator, and I'm always giving my blessing like, oh, maybe next time, but I hope you guys have a great time. I love when my friends make friends with my friends and then go off and do stuff and even leave me out. I honestly, please do not invite me to everything. It's exhausting. Yeah. But I mean, I do like to get invited, but don't, I guess invite me to everything, but be okay when I say no. That's right. More truthful. Cause it does feel great to be invited.
I would say I'm a little bit better at that. A couple of weeks ago, I tried setting up 2 people on a blind date, and I'm not as bad. And
it didn't go good?
He had warned me, he's like, this isn't your gift. I thought it went good because they both agreed to go, and then I was like, and do you want me to come with? So Ross and I went on the blind date with them, and he would have said 100%. He's like, this is a for sure that they hit it off. We're talking and stuff. And then, and I did too. And then it didn't go anywhere.
Oh.
So Ross was like, I told you so. He's like, and he's like,
some people,
I don't know if we needed to go type of a thing, but I thought it was great because I'd never been on a blind date.
You were married at 17.
Right. I'm like, this is my opportunity to go and see what it's like. But I was like, well, it's not like either of them are married to somebody else. You never know down the road. Like, I'm still optimistic. It could have happened.
I play matchmaker a little bit. Like, I try to be a little bit on the DL about it, but.
You don't invite them both over?
No. I pretty much like plant a lot of seeds, right? I'll like plant the seed in the one for the other and plant the seed in the other for the other, that kind of thing. And then I might even create a space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. We should wrap this up then.
So. Oh, golly. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about hospitality? If you're just like, this is the one time in your life that you have an audience of maybe 50.
7.
No, I think it's just, I don't really know, because honestly, I spent so much time telling myself, oh, it's just because you're from a big family that people don't do this and other people are doing this. I remember like talking to our friend Jake, and he's single, and he was like, nope, it's just the culture has changed. And I do believe it's biblical, and I believe that people will be blessed for like stepping out in that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay, like if the food burns or whatever. I've had it all happen, you know, and except food poisoning. But
That's coming,
if
I'm sure.
it will come, you know, that I'm like, hey.
Last Thanksgiving, I put a turkey in the oven, and I didn't realize the oven had broke, and the turkey was absolutely 100% raw when it was time to come out.
Oh no.
Yeah.
But you know what? Guess what? It all worked out because one of my friends that was coming made a turkey at home because she knew there was going to be a lot of people over and she wanted to have leftovers. And so she sent her kid back to her house to get another turkey that was already done.
Yeah.
And the gravy. And so we ended up having turkey, and then we popped it in my secondary oven that was working, and it cooked while we were eating, visiting, playing games, having whatever. And she was able to go home with a bunch of leftovers still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You know, it like worked itself out. I was so stressed in the moment, but praise God, you know.
And I think that is just not taking the pressure of the cooking. Like if you're stepping out, order pizza.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Make it like as simplified, or like Lois said, do it somewhere else. If that's what's your stress? You have to figure out like, why am I not doing that?
Yeah.
Is it getting the house cleaned? Then like Lois said, go to a park.
Yeah.
Meet somewhere else. It's totally, people just want to engage. And I just think, especially with having had COVID go through and everything, that you're like,
people want connection.
Yes. The face to face is so important. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're doing this podcast.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, I've loved, I feel like I could talk to you for another 2 hours. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to come on and chat with us about that and share your experiences with hospitality and discipleship. And
yeah, anytime.
I think you're kind of a rock star when it comes to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dolly, for coming and joining us.
It's been so fun. Thanks for chatting. See you next time. Thanks, doll.
Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.